Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the BizUp podcast. We are now episode 3. Can you believe it? Lucky number 3. 3 is my favorite number, so I have a really good feeling about this episode. I'm fortunate enough to be joined by Jeff Anderson, who's the managing director of Anderson Property Advisors, among a myriad of other roles. I'm very honored to have you on, Jeff. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Will. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday.
I'm as good as can be.
Excellent.
Lockdown. Yep.
And we've met a few times and had a few really good chats. And I'm so glad to have you on the podcast because you are always quite entertaining, I find, and you say things a little bit differently to most. You are the managing director of Anderson Property Advisors, but you have a long history leading up to that point in real estate. Can you give us a little bit of background on sort of your journey up until this point, I guess?
Sure. And thanks for the invitation too, Will, for the opportunity to share my experience with your followers.
Pleasure.
So I've been in the real estate world for 33 years. I've managed, owned, or partnered some of the biggest brands in Melbourne. I won't necessarily name them unless you want me to.
Oh, it's totally up to you. I don't mind. If you want to give them a shout out and a plug, go for it.
Well, not really, because I've moved on. But So anyway, some very big brands in some very upmarket areas, inner eastern suburbs of Melbourne, Melbourne predominantly. So I started as a 19-year-old. I knocked on a real estate agent's door and said to him, "Do yourself a favour, put me on." And I was actually a bricklayer at the time.
Wow.
I was a brickies labourer. And I saw all these houses getting built around me in the 80s, and they're all getting sold signs put on them within seconds or minutes, or, hours. And I thought, gee, that looks like a good job. So he knocked me back 5 times. I kept going back. And eventually he said, all right, I'll put you on, which is what he did. And I didn't make a sale in 3 months.
Yeah.
And I thought, OMG, what have I done? And I could feel the pressure building. There's the door.
Yeah.
And in my fourth month, I sold 14 properties.
Wow. Okay, firstly, can I just say, why did you keep persisting with this guy? Did you know him? Did he have a really good reputation? Why didn't you go to other people? You're like, nah, this is the guy I want to work for.
Because he had a friend of mine was his sales manager.
Okay, that's why. Yeah.
I wanted to learn from him. I'm a big believer of surrounding yourself with people that are good or brilliant at what they do, and just be the sponge. Just sit and observe for a year, watch and copper and mirror everything they do, and eventually you put your own personality into that. But I just wanted to work with this guy, so that was the reason.
What caused that explosion? Was it like a build-up? Was it a bit of luck? Was it you learned a lot in those leading up with all your failures leading up until that point? You put all that into play with a bit of magic, and then boom. Was it a point you remember, or you kind of got into, aha, here's something, like an aha moment?
There were 5 salespeople in this boutique office. It was in Doncaster, at Doncaster East, actually. So it was back in the day when all the Hong Kongians were bringing their money over from Hong Kong and buying all the land in Doncaster, Templestowe, and a lot of it was apple orchards still. And there were homes just exploding. I think I watched this guy for 3 months. He was an ex-Hong Kong policeman.
Oh, wow.
Extremely ruthless. And I watched him and analysed him. I sat right next to him in the office. There were no partitions. You could hear and see everything that would happen. And I just watched him and eventually adapted that to the Australian way. And it just clicked. I made the first sale, then I got a taste for it. But to answer your question, I think it was basically a necessity to being able to eat.
Yeah.
I'm earning your money for 3 months at the age of 19.
And was it commission only at that point?
Yeah, 100%. 100% commission. So I had 3 months of breathing space, and I knew at that point I'd be in trouble if I hadn't made a sale. So I guess it was a part of desperation that kicked in. So I lifted my game, I doubled my work input, and I just got really serious about it. I thought, like everyone, real estate agents sit back, they play golf every day, drive Mercedes, and wear big gold chains. Right? It's not how it is. It's hard work.
And that's something I feel is a little bit missing in today's sort of age where you're talking about you had 3 months of money left to survive, your back was completely against the wall. It was essentially failure was not an option. You had to succeed, you had to make it. And I think that is such an incredibly motivating factor where a lot of kind of the generation today, there are so many safety nets in place, whether that be in the job, you have a base salary that you can fall back on, you have government support and allowances, you might have parents that can support you and give you that money. And so many people aren't in that position of make it or break it. If they don't succeed in this thing, they will literally be not eating food for a week, potentially facing living on the street or going into a really bad neighborhood. And they don't have that like kick in the ass motivating factor behind them, which a lot of like kind of back in the day, you just had to make it. You had no other option.
Yeah, you're spot on. It was exactly like that. I think the petrol allowance back in 1986 was $80 a week, and I was probably spending 120 on petrol alone. I was fortunate to be in an area that was developing, so it was one of the last eastern suburbs areas where there was still a lot of land being subdivided. So I had a plethora of builders around me, none of which I knew, all European, all Yugoslavian, Greeks, Italians, not many Aussie builders.
Yeah. Yeah, no, actually, it's funny you mentioned that. My grandfather's actually from Yugoslavia, and he migrated over and started building houses in Sydney. And he would build the house. Sorry, there's a bit of a tangent here, but you mentioned Yugoslavia, so I'm going to delve into my family background. And he would build the houses in Sydney, and then he would sell them maybe like a month or two later. And he'd be such a terrible businessman, and he was super honest, right? He didn't know much of the language, so he'd build the house. And we're talking about houses like in Balmain, and they have views of like the Circular Quay and the Opera House and stuff like this. And he'd build them and then sell them like a month later for like, whatever people would tell him they're worth. And he'd sell them for like $10,000, $15,000 and stuff like that. And it was funny. I was maybe 8 years ago, I was driving around the neighborhood with my mum, and she was showing me all the houses Granddad built. And now they're like multi-million, millions upon millions of dollars worth of houses. I was like, oh, what could have been?
Heartbreaking, huh?
Yeah.
Hindsight's a great thing.
Yeah. So it was a lot of those builders. You didn't know any of them.
And with the Yugoslavians, having a bit of a heritage there yourself, you might resonate with this, is that the way I broke into it, because they had their connections with established, successful agents. I was the new kid on the block. I was young and wet behind the ears. So, what did I know, right?
Yeah.
So I thought, how am I going to break into all these new homes that are getting built with these builders that have got established relationships? And in the end, 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning, they're on site. Sometimes there were no real rules back then. At 6 o'clock, they were out there with the hammer and chisel, and off they were going. And I used to go around there at 7:30 in the morning, take them the morning newspaper. I'd buy the Age or the Sun, and I'd give them the newspaper. And next thing, they'd invite me over, to have the grappa at 7 o'clock in the morning. With their toasted sandwich at 7 o'clock in the morning, middle of winter, and they're shooting down these shots of rice wine and high potent liquor.
And if you join them, that's how you get on their good side. You're one of us. You can take
and that's what happened. I became Yugoslavian. Yeah. The Aussie, the Skippy. Yeah. So that's how I broke that. They liked me for that. But then they gave me an opportunity, and then it grew from there. Sold 1, sold 2, sold 10. And then all the other builders wanted to know, who's this Jeff Anderson guy? Right. So he must have buyers. Yeah. So just getting that momentum I had to become an alcoholic.
Yeah, you got to do what you got to do. So you went from being a tradie into real estate, and then I guess you just fell in love with it, right? Because you've been doing it ever since. So what was the moment? Was there a moment that you're like, I really enjoyed this, I can see myself doing this long term? Or was it just like, all right, next year, what are we doing? Next year, what are we doing? And what do you love about real estate so much that has kept you in the game and not decided to put you, go elsewhere?
I'll be brutally honest. I mean, I think most people will tell you they love people and they love houses. Well, I call BS on that. Most people are in it to make good money, above average income money. Yeah. Life-changing money for some people. So I saw that was the driver. at a 19-year-old. I didn't come from a privileged background, very hard upbringing, not wealthy parents at all. So I knew the value of a dollar, and I didn't want to be 50, 60 and be like my father financially. So I knew I had to go hard, and I had a plan to, be a millionaire at the age of 40. I had a 20-year plan, and I just worked hard for the first 5 years, real hard. I got noticed, I got poached again, I got poached again. So every time I stepped up to a better branded company, a more dominant market leader, or a more affluent area and clientele, I just lifted my game, and I kept surrounding myself with the best operators in the office that I went to. So, you get a following after a while. If you're any good in real estate, you do get a reputation, and that spreads. It's a small industry as far as the leaders and the owners of reputable companies. And after a little while, there was almost like a bidding war for me. There were people wanting me to come on and drive their team. So I became a sales manager. A local Doncaster office poached me from that office to become the sales manager of that office at 23. I was there for 4 years, and a massive franchise closer into Melbourne poached me, and it just went from there. At that move, I dominated. Well, I ripped about 50% market share off the leading market player in that area, and it was quite an upmarket area at the age of 25. So
wow.
I almost bankrupted them, is what they told me. After they poached me, they said, "You had us on our knees. We don't know how you did it for 2 years, but we can't beat you, so we want you to join us." And that's when I realized the value of my worth. Yeah. So I then became quite confident at negotiating commission arrangements, salary packages, company cars, phones, all the perks. And I pretty much got everything I asked for from that point.
So you found that thing that you were just really good at, and you're like, well, I'm really good at this. I really enjoy it.
Yeah,
Why would I want to do anything else?
Yeah, look, I'm not it's not ego, but I mean, it's hard to ignore when every company you leave, and the principal or the owner says to you, "Wow, don't leave. What does it take?" Anyway, you don't find many Jeff Andersons out there.
Yeah.
They don't exist, right? And I heard that everywhere that I went. Every company I was at, I rose to the number one operator in that company within a year. And the bigger brands, I guess I was in the top 3 or top 4 or 5 salesmen out of 150 salespeople, 10 office networks. So I realized that I was well above average. I wasn't the usual or the normal.
Had you given that some thought? Have you, reflecting back, what made you stand out? What was it? Just more of a hunger? Was it more of a drive? What separated you from the rest of the pack? Were you like, what is it? What did people like about you? You were a straight shooter. You told it how it was. You're really charismatic, charming. What do you think it was?
Look, a bit of all of that. I'm 54 now, got a few wrinkles, but people used to tell me I wasn't a bad looking rooster back in my
always
day.
Helps,
and that helps. So I guess I was very aware of my presentation. I always had the beautiful shiny shoes. They weren't expensive, but I made sure they were polished every day. Right. And that's the first thing people look at you. Someone that told me years ago.
That's true. And especially women as well.
I was going to say women, if you're out on the dating circuit, and I've been there too, not anymore, but, it's the first thing they do. I think the women look at our eyes and then our shoes.
Yeah. And they judge you so much about who you are, your character, your background, your financial situation, everything based on your shoes.
Straight away. Now, men are programmed differently. We don't necessarily look at their shoes first, but
we
won't get
true.
in that chat. So I think I took pride in my presentation. I always made sure my ties were bright and cheery and up. I always made sure my shirts were pressed and everything was looking good.
Because I guess it's like, and I think that even it's it is a thing in real estate, isn't it? Where you want the person who's selling you like a multi-million-dollar house, or even $500,000-$600,000 house, to be well presented, well dressed. If they look like they've got it together, or if they look successful. you know, you have that impression of, okay, well, they've obviously sold a heap of houses, they're going to be successful with my house as well, and they can trust you and put you at ease. Is that just something that's always rung true and will forever ring true in real estate?
I think so. Whether it's good or bad, people do. First impressions matter. They're
Yeah.
critical. I can't remember the exact percentages, but someone told me a long time ago also that 70% of what you say is not heard. Right? It's how you say it. It's the way your language is intertwined as to what we listen to. So I learned that there are key words, key triggers to get people emotive about whether they're going to like you, trust you, and use you. So I studied that. I studied DNA. I studied DNA, NLP, so neuro-linguistic programming at a very young age, self-taught. So I learned how to read people very quickly, within seconds. So body language, eye movement, mannerisms, all of that. So I knew pretty quick at an early age whether someone was lying to me, whether they were reflective or futuristic, or and that became one of my highest skill sets.
Especially in real estate, that would almost be like a superpower.
You're right. You're absolutely right, Will. It became a superpower. And I got to the point where I'd be in sales meetings and I knew what people were going to say in my crew before they even say it. You could see the way it was rolling. And I realized that no one else knew. And they'd often look at me and go, how did you know that? And that's when I knew I was a bit different. But it was not because I'm special. It's just because I put in the hard yards, right?
So before we sort of jump into like your other business and what your kind of like your passion is at the moment, while we're still talking about like real estate in general, and I guess we might have some, maybe some younger real estate agents out there, or maybe some people thinking about jumping into real estate and giving that a crack. What advice would you give them moving into it? Or wanting to get to the next level? Maybe they're stagnating. Like what more could they do? And I know it's easy to just say like put in more work longer hours, work harder, outwork everyone else. But what does that mean exactly?
Yeah, no, I'm not about bigger hours now. I actually perform better now working less hours than I ever have in my life. Now, I guess I've earned that after 30 years with a large following and a big database. But to answer your question, I think the world's different, as we know. The last 3 decades, it's not the real estate world that it was back in the 80s, right? You've got everything at a touch of a button now. It's super techie. You've got, everything's accessible and everyone's an expert, right? They can Google something, find out the historical sales price of a property. They've got information and experts everywhere. So to answer your question, anyone young thinking of a career move or even just getting into the industry, perhaps from university or school, there are probably 3 key factors. Without doubt, the number one is networking. So you must be networked. And whether that means you join a professional networking group, whether you start your own, whether you even just sort of create a group following on a Facebook page with your old school buddies, something, you've got to get networked. So that's the first thing. Once you're networked, you've got to build a database. So you've got to have a CRM. You've got to have, even if it's an old card file system or pen and paper, record everybody you meet, get their phone number, email address, and give them information, give them knowledge. Give before you get, right? So givers gain. I'm a big believer of that.
I am as well.
Don't expect things to come to you. They won't. The clients have too many options out there now. There's 10,000 estate agents in Melbourne. That we're not hard to find. So networking, database, and honesty, integrity, honesty. Tell them the truth. Don't try and spin the ball. Don't try and be a clever, manipulator. Just tell them the truth.
And I think also now you saying that as well, as easier it is to get information out there, and you might like maybe a bit dubious on one sale, the online world we live in now, that person can write a review about you, they can tell your friends, they can post on social media, and was that one sale really worth that thing potentially coming and haunting you for the rest of your career? So I think honesty is probably one of the most important things out there.
Yeah, absolute key. But you've also got to get out and get yourself known in your community. So get involved with your community, whether it's the community house, the local neighbourhood centre, or just going and introducing yourselves and giving them an Easter egg at Easter at every trader and shopping mall in your area. Let them know who you are, and ask them who else do they know that might want to transact real estate. A lot of people
Yeah,
don't know that.
I think that's really important, and especially in the like the digital age we live in the online marketplace. I guess it can become quite easy to get wrapped up in that world and invest everything to the online space in your Instagram, Facebook profile, LinkedIn, everything, whatever. But then you forget about like the actual down to earth human interactions of just like chatting to your neighbor and telling them about what you do, or joining a neighborhood like Christmas party or something like that, or a community event, actually physically going out and talking to people and not just putting everything out in the online world, which I think a lot of people put too much value in that and forget about like what at the end of the day what it's all about is that human connection, that one-on-one, because you're dealing with that person. If you do a good job for that person, they'll tell someone else, and the more you put yourself out there physically, I think is really advantageous.
Yeah, no, you're reading it beautifully, Will. You want a job?
Well, hey, hey, we'll talk later. So I guess at some point you've had this amazing career in real estate and sort of selling houses and um, selling, all that sort of stuff. And now you work as a buyer's advocate as well. And this is your own business that you started up. Yeah, is this something you've always wanted to do, or at what point did you go, look, I know all the behind the scenes stuff. I know how like all the strings work. I know the system in and out. I could really use this now to help people. Like, what motivated you to start that?
Yeah, I guess no, it was never a plan. And I guess the first buyer advocacy businesses were made, the community were made aware of them, I guess, from a couple of TV shows, The Block and others. Probably 10 years ago, there was a handful of buyer advocates out there across Victoria, Australia. It's exploded, that marketplace. There's a lot of them now, but a lot of them haven't walked the walk. They haven't done
Yeah,
the
you
hard
see buyers advocates and they're in their early 20s or 25,
Yeah,
and you're like,
yeah. We've gone and got their license and done a quick short course on YouTube, and all of a sudden they're a property expert, right?
yeah,
Now, they might be good with numbers or a great accountant, but it's not what it's about. It's not about that. It's about people. Yeah, I don't actually even like houses.
yeah,
I like people,
yeah,
right? So it's a people game. So I didn't really plan to do it, but I guess when the government brought in Victoria legislation, our state government, 4 or 5 years ago, and as a business owner at that point, running a franchised office, a Century 21 franchised office, which is the second largest in Australia and largest franchise in the world, the obligation from the principal, the officer in effective control, was so onerous. The legislation and the paperwork and the detail and it became a drain. It became expensive. It became labor intensive, and I found that I was not enjoying the all that back end stuff. Yeah, I'm a person that likes to meet people, and that's what it's about. But I found that 70% of my time was caught in the office,
yeah,
keeping the legislators happy, so that my audit ticked every box every 6 or 12 months. And I started to lose the passion for that. After 30 odd years, I built up thousands of, I guess, transactions all over Melbourne. And I get bombarded from people wanting to know, how do I bid? And I'm an auctioneer as well. So I've done 4,000 auctions.
wow,
I always get asked to troubleshoot. I've got two 20-year-old children. Their kids and their friends are all getting married now, having kids and buying first homes and properties. And they're always asking me for my advice. And past clients would always ring me saying, "Oh, we're thinking of buying this or bidding on that. Can you help us?" So I thought, hold on, there's a great idea for a business here. I got a friend of mine rang me up who'd repartnered with a female doctor. She recently got divorced, and there was a sizable amount of money that had come into her possession as a result of that settlement. He referred her to me because she had never bought a property. Her husband had always done that. So he rang me saying, can I help her and what would it cost? And that was the light bulb moment, because I did help her. I helped her buy a property. I saved her $40,000 on a $350,000 purchase. And that saving was based on what she told me she was going to offer. And that was full price. And I said, no, hold on. I'm working for you now, the buyer, not the vendor. So I pulled $40,000 out of the price. I wrapped it up in half an hour. And she couldn't believe it. Her mind was blown.
Yeah.
She said to me, Jeff, do you know how many girlfriends I've got? She was a 50-year-old, so middle-aged, divorcee, never negotiated, didn't know what a contract was, didn't know what to look for in property. She said, I've got so many girlfriends in my situation. We know the divorce rate's about 1 in 2, unfortunately. And she said, I've got dozens of girlfriends that need your help. And that was the light bulb moment, Will. That was when I said, right, I'm going to set up Anderson Property Advisors, my target market. And it was important you knew who your target market was. And that was middle-aged divorced women, because they're everywhere and they need help. So that was how the business started. And from there, I simply let everyone I knew that I had sold to or bought for over the sales journey that I was changing sides. I was jumping the fence. I was going to go and work for the good guys, right?
Yeah.
Save them time, money, and stress. And I know all the tricks. I've trained hundreds of agents. I've sat in high-level boardrooms. I've run them. So I know how it rolls. And when you've got that experience, it's very hard for them to shoot down your credibility.
Exactly. You're like the guy, a special guy on the inside working for us, our secret weapon. Have you ever been in a situation where you've dealt with a vendor or another agent who knew who you were, and then they're like, oh shit, it's Jeff, I can't put anything by him, I gotta just like give him the good deal, because there's no point me trying to argue it?
100%.
Yeah.
Just before lockdown, the first one in March this year, 2020, for those that are looking at this 10 years when I'm gone. 2020 now, September. But back in March, just before the lockdown, I bought for a young lady. There were 2 other buyer advocates there, a crowd of 100 people. I was there representing my niece, a young first home buyer down by the beach. And long story short, I walked in 5 minutes after while the preamble was going on, before they were asking for the bidding. You don't want to show your hand too early. Yeah. I don't know when to hold them, when to fold them, when to walk away, all of that.
Yeah.
So I turned up 5 minutes into the agent's blurb. And as I walked past, one of the buyer's advocates said, oh, shit, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So, I went on to buy that property for her, successful. There's a lot of things that I do to do that and make that happen, but won't take up time talking about that.
And don't give away any trade secrets.
No, I'd have to charge your viewers for that. So look, it happens all the time. I know that agents are very wary of my experience and my abilities, and they do, I guess, sharpen their skills if they know. And a good agent will ask who else you got coming in to look at your property, and if they hear, oh, Jeff Anderson, well, they've got a different spiel for that.
The Jeff Anderson script.
That's it. Pull out the Jeff Anderson script. So,
so have you found now that?
Well,
have you found that you, from that initial middle-aged divorcee demographic, have you expanded that, or have you kind of shifted that now, where we're seeing like a big surgence of those younger first home buyers, and now especially with big government incentives to purchase your new home and now even build your new home? Are you seeing a lot more younger people now seek out buyers advocacy, or are you kind of still stuck to your demographic and or target market from when you first started?
Yeah, no, great question. And the answer is yes. The market's absolutely swung 180 degrees. the first home buyers are predominantly the majority of my market now. And I put a lot of that down on my children, who are referring me their friends, who then I save them plenty and educate them as well. It's not about the money saving, it's also about the education. So I make sure they've got something to carry them through life to apply, because it'll never change, right? Technology will, the way we transact will, but the tricks and traps won't ever change. They're always going to be there. So I make sure I educate them. I give them a lot more really than what they pay me for, because I want to leave the younger generation with a legacy, to something to anchor them for when they go into this position, maybe 10 years down the track. And that's the average tenure of holding a property, is about 10 years. But yeah, first home buyers have grown enormously, because as I help my children's friends, they then refer me to their networks, and it goes from there. Plus, a lot of the people I've sold to and for over the decades have now got children themselves that are buying properties. So they're referring me to their children. So it's gone next generation, yeah.
So what would you say now? I guess I was going to ask you, like, for the people that haven't heard of a buyer's advocate or what you do, could you give us a little bit about that? But I mean, if you've been listening up until this point, the advantages of having a buyer's advocate, and especially someone in your position, I think is quite clear. So I'm not going to ask you that, because if you have been listening, it'll be super clear why you should have one. Maybe I'll ask you now instead, I guess, say I was to engage you as a buyer's advocate, and maybe someone's never done that before, and now they've been listening to this and they're like, look, that really sounds great. Just really briefly, what's that process look like? It's like, okay, Jeff, I'm thinking about buying a house. Here's the property. Just really quickly, what happens in the process?
Yeah, well, I'll anchor that with a real study. I've got an Irish guy at the moment that I'm helping. He came here 2 years ago. He'd be a similar age to yourself, and probably your younger listeners there will. He doesn't know Melbourne very well. He earns very good money in the trades area, but he hasn't got a clue where to buy. So he's looking at Diamond Creek. He's looking at Aspendale. He's looking out in Croydon, north, south, east, west. He's asking me. And he just came to me off my website, out of the blue, from a Google search. He came to sit with me just prior to lockdown, and he said to me, tell me, where should I buy? So it started from there. I had an hour and a half free consultation with him. I educated him with a whole raft of things, and he appointed me on the spot. And I've been helping him for 3 or 4 weeks. And so that's the beginning. I guess there's different levels of buyers, right? So there's ones that know nothing about where to buy, what to pay, and most importantly, where to add value. So not only capital growth, but improving properties either structurally or cosmetically. So there are little things you can do to a property to increase their value, in the tens of thousands of dollars. So there's that type of buyer. And then I guess you've got the second home buyer or the investor. And then you've got the older demographic who are looking to downsize to shore up their retirement and maybe top up their superannuation. So, it's a similar question. Like, people say to me, how's the market? And I say, which one? There's 36.
Yeah.
I go, what?
Yeah.
The media talk about the auction clearance rate, or the market's doing this, or the market's doing that. Well, there's not one market. There's heaps of them. So it depends. To answer your question, Will, depends on the type of the buyer, their experience, their expectation. But trying to summarize it quickly, it's a high-level professional negotiation service that I offer, saving the buyer time, money, and stress. I do secure 90% of properties that I negotiate for. I actually get 90% of them. So, and that's the other thing. Most people think, if I make an offer, I'll buy the house, I'll get the house, right? Well, no, not when interest rate is 2%. There's 15 people wanting to buy the same property.
Yeah.
Right?
That's the thing too. And I've asked this question as well to some other agents, and they didn't really give me a clear answer. But it was essentially, I think, yeah, people think, oh, I'm going to put in an offer this property. That's the only one they get, or if they don't like that, I think there's a big misconception of how it works. And I was talking to one agent. There was a property, and they did an inspection. They're like, oh, on the day of the inspection, we had 4 offers, and I was like,
Yep.
wow, is it? And I was like, how does the buyer know which one to go for? Do they just go for the highest one? And they're like, no, not always. They take into like a myriad of factors. So and like what you're saying, like someone else might have put a higher bid on that property for you, but you might have put in, maybe $20,000 less. Then there's all these other factors that go into that decision making to take that, even though financially it's a lower offer, but there could be tons of other reasons why they decide to go with that one. And I think that's a big part of what you're talking about.
You're spot on, and and some of those reasons are like, so it's not always about money for people. Some people in their latter part of life have got serious wealth in property. $10,000 or $20,000 to them is peanuts. It's not going to change their life when they bought the home for £10,000 in 1962, and it's now worth 3.9 million. Right?
Yeah.
What's 20 grand? Blow out of their glove box, they wouldn't know.
Yeah.
So that sort of person is going to want to know the background of the buyer. Are they young first home buyers? Are they newlyweds? Are they struggling financially? Are they needing a bit of assistance? Some people like to give some others opportunity to get into the property ladder. There are owners that think like that. It's not always about, well, who's offering the most money. Settlement comes into it. So if some people have bought, they have to settle on the property they've bought. So if you can offer a quick settlement, i.e. have your finance pre-approved rather than make an offer subject to finance for 14 days, which really leaves the owner in limbo for 14 days, gives you a total out in 14 days, and they can't proceed on their next stage until you've gone unconditional. So that condition could actually really sever the offer. The length of settlement, if you can't vacate where you're at because you've got 6 months to go on your lease and you don't want to break that lease because you're going to lose thousands there, you offer a long settlement, that could go against you. You might offer to release the deposit early. So when you pay a deposit as a buyer, it goes into a non-interest bearing trust account that the sales agent holds in trust on behalf of the owner. Now that normally is held until settlement. The agent takes his commission on advertising out of that 10%, and the balance is transferred to the owner at settlement. If you offer an immediate release of that deposit, and it's not legislated that it has to be 10%, by the way, you can pay 5, 7, 10, 20. So if you offer a bigger than 10% deposit and offer the owner immediate release to that in order to go and pay a deposit on another house that they want to buy, that could tip it your favour big time. So you've got to know the motivation of why the person's selling. What are their goals? And that's one of the key things I teach people when they're negotiating. That's the first thing you need to know. It's not about the range, the 10% range, and what's the price and all of that. Why are they selling? What are they doing? Now, a selling agent's not going to tell the average buyer that sort of information, but they'll tell me.
Yeah, because you know the questions to ask as well. Like, I think everything you just said, I feel like the majority of people wouldn't have even given any thought. They just look at the property, they look at the price for the property, and they don't think much more than that. Like, oh, I have to offer within the range they've set out on the website.
And that's the failing of the legislation, right? The law doesn't state how you're to engage. So the terms of engagement are not clear. They're not. There is no legislation other than the 10% range, the statement of information. This is Victoria only, by the way. Every state has different legislation to confuse buyers even more if they're relocating from Sydney or Perth. I mean, it's a different ballgame. So you've got to know your state's legislation. But as far as the agent's negotiation process, that's not legislated. So they can make whatever rules they want to when they get multiple offers, like you were talking about. They can make up the rules about how they're going to present that to the owner, when they're going to do it, whether or not they reveal any of those other offers, not only to the other buyers, but the people in their office, the competing salespeople. because they're going to tell you it's one big team, right? But reality is it's not.
It's every man for himself, isn't it? Or every person for themselves in real estate.
Kill or be killed. That's it. That's because it's commission only. And for that reason, agents have a terrible reputation because they're ruthless, because they got to be.
Yeah, and you were saying, and I think a lot of first-time buyers or people who don't have a lot of knowledge in the area as well, they rely on that real estate agent to provide them with information. They'll ask that real estate agent, "Is this a good deal? Is this a good price? What should I ask?" And you got to think that real estate agent isn't working for you. They're working 100%. For the homeowner, trying to sell the house for them at the highest price. And then they're also then working for themselves to try and sell it at the highest price so they get the highest commission. So that person you're going to for advice and asking questions, and you might think they might feel like that they have your best interest at heart. It's generally very rare for that to be the case because they have all these other ulterior motives. And I think that's why it's so important, and people don't seem to see the value, or hopefully now they are realizing the value in having that buyer's advocate who is that person on your side, is your team member, your person you can go for advice, your person that you can send into the front lines and do battle with that real estate agent to get you the best price. And I think more people need to be aware of that fact, that real estate agent isn't on your side. They're on the vendor's side.
That's right. They're paid by the vendor, and they really are out to manipulate your emotion, your bank balance. They're there to get as much money out of your bank into their vendor's bank, and indirectly theirs as well.
I hope we don't make any real estate agents upset about this, us talking. Ruffle a few feathers out there.
Well, look, actually, in case there are agents looking at this, I'm not an anti-agent person. I mean, I've been there, I've done it.
Yeah, so, and that's the thing. Like, you can't say anything like, "Oh, you don't like." You are and have been for 30 years, and you still love it.
Yeah, so. Yeah. But there are agents and there are agents, right? It's like there are good policemen, there are bad policemen. There are good doctors, there are bad doctors. It's the same in real estate. There are some brilliant agents out there that are absolutely top of their game, credible, honest, integral, and highly skilled and transparent. But there are more that aren't. And that's all I'm trying to say. And it's particularly the younger ones coming in that are under the pressure from their other salespeople and opposition salespeople who really are trying to take them out of the game, right? That's how it works out there. So you've got to watch commission incentives as well. A lot of salespeople have very healthy commission kickers, increases on the fee once a certain price gets broached or breached. And that's what they're going to try and do. The master salespeople will work out your emotion. They'll be asking you more questions than you ask them. And they'll do it in a way, if they're good, that you don't even know what they're doing. You just think they're being a nice guy and they're trying to help you. Well, no, they're trying to get into your head so they know how to negotiate with you, right? That's what it's about. And there's trials, there's dozens of trial closing questions that people ask at open for inspections, right? Not people, but selling agents will ask you little triggers as you're going around, because that's when your defenses are low. You're not even aware. They're gathering your DNA. And you think they're just being nice, telling you about this, that, and the other. And by the way, they'll just slip in a question. Right?
Yeah, it's like you're just looking over the fireplace, and you're like, "Oh, that's a really nice fireplace." And you're imagining the kids playing in the backyard, and I'm going to build a cubby house over there. Then they just ask you a little question while you're in that mindset. Yeah,
that's it. And you've forgotten you've even answered it, or even why they're
because you're still dreaming about the backyard and the trees you're going to plant. And
your wife's setting up the kitchen. You're working out what the desk is going to fit in the bedroom. Are we going to be able to get the
where are we going to put the TV? The couch will look good there.
All of that. Well, and when agents are trained in watching that stuff, right? So, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no, more than answered. You've added so much value, and I think if people don't see the value in a buyer's advocate after sort of our discussions, that it's 100% their loss and they deserve to pay $20,000 more on what they could have got on the property. If people out there listening today like what you say, and you've touched on it, and we've mentioned sort of Anderson Property Advisors as a name, you can give it a Google, but what's the best way to sort of reach out to you to get in contact with you and maybe ask you some questions or get your advice or engage you as a buyer's advocate?
Well, look, you can, and I state again that it's an obligation free. I'm happy to consult for an hour, give you an hour's worth of intel.
And I say that's very generous as well. An hour of free consultation. Most people give you a quick 15-minute phone call or half an hour at the most. That is, and when you said you spoke to this other guy for an hour and a half, I was blown away. Like, you really do care. And that's why I did want to have you on the podcast, because I know you genuinely care about people and you want to do the right thing, and you hate seeing people get ripped off by some of the bad apples out there, or, you know, especially people that are just, especially the older generation that is so trusting and a little bit naive when they come into this, and they're paying way more than they should be. And you generally started this because you wanted to help these people. Like, you're not in it to make money, you're in it to work with people, help them get a good deal and see them happy in their new home. And that's why I really wanted to have you on. Otherwise I wouldn't. So you're super generous, and can super vouch for your time and your motivations behind all this. Sorry to interrupt you there, I just kind of pumped you off a bit, but I just wanted to sort of let people know my impressions of you. So an hour free consultation. What's the best way to reach out to you? Your website?
Yep, my website. So www.andersonpropertyadvisors.com.au. You could email me, Jeff at Anderson Property Advisors, or just hit me up, send me a text or call me on the mobile 0411 222 744. You can follow me Instagram, Facebook. The logo looks a bit like that.
Yeah, there we go. And I'll put all this information in the description below as well, so you can just click the link and get in contact with Jeff. And check him out on Instagram. He'll occasionally post the funny video of jumping into a pool or doing something wacky. Or I watched your I really like your auctioning videos. They're fun to watch as well, to see you live in action. So definitely check out Jeff on social media. Jeff, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast today, and I look forward to talking to you in the future.
Been a pleasure, Will. Thank you very much for your time.